When the Sony PlayStation released in September of 1995, it was not long before Sony was making its name known in software publishing, as well as having the newest 32-bit console on the block. Sports video games were no exception to this rule. The debut of NFL Game Day in late 1995 ran unopposed, really. I don't count Konami's NFL Full Contact because that game was not very good. Meanwhile, EA Sports was having issues getting Madden off the ground. In fact, Madden 96 for the PlayStation was scrapped. So, for all intents and purposes, again, with no disrespect to Konami, Sony had the football stage, the pro football stage, to itself with NFL Game Day in late 1995 and ran with that football. The game looked great for the time. It sounded amazing with great sound effects and player grunts. There was season mode. It was everything that we really wanted or were looking for in a Madden game, but it wasn't Madden this time, and the game played on its own. It wasn't a Madden copycat per se. The passing game played out a little bit differently. The running game was a bit more difficult and challenging to pull off, but that was part of the appeal of the game. And again, if you were an NFL fan in late 1995 and you owned a PlayStation, this was pretty much the game you were playing. The success of NFL Game Day would go on to create a series of NFL Game Day titles for the original PlayStation and the PlayStation 2, and that series would last for many years. The other thing that the success of NFL Game Day brought about was the creation of a college football equivalent. Much like we saw with Bill Walsh college football after Madden was so successful, we saw the creation of the NCAA GameBreaker series for the PlayStation. This was the maiden release. Released in 1996, not too long after or around the release of NFL Game Day 97. In fact, there is an offer for NFL Game Day 97 right there on the front cover. And if you open the game and take a look at the back of the instruction manual, it's basically telling you about NFL Game Day 97 as well. This game promised all 111 Division 1A and top 1AA football teams here, as well as all time teams. The advantage of having CD-ROM media and all of that extra memory is you could store more information on here, so you could get all of those teams in the game and instead of picking and choosing which college programs you wanted to include in your game when you were talking about cartridges for the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo. This game, like NFL Game Day, sold very well and went on to create a series of games that lasted for years across both the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2. So in this episode of Unsealed, we're going to be taking a look at and opening one sealed PlayStation GameBreaker game and one sealed PS2 GameBreaker game. We're going to talk about the rise of the series, which we've already started to talk about, and also, unfortunately, the demise of the series as competition from EA Sports eventually caught up to and then far exceeded the GameBreaker series. In 1997, the release of NCAA GameBreaker 98 brought about a big change, just like the release of NFL Game Day 98 that year, in that sprite-based player models were being replaced by polygon-based models for a more 3D or more modern for the time look. It was a big deal and caught a lot of attention from game magazine critics and game journalists everywhere. This was a big deal, this big change we had all been looking for, moving away from sprites and that 16-bit look and more toward that polygon-based 32-bit 3D look that we had been waiting for. GameBreaker 98 was competing against NCAA Football 98 from EA Sports that year, and EA Sports game, just like with Madden 97 and Madden 98, was still sprite-based. So we had the more advanced-looking GameBreaker 98 versus the more tried-and-true formula for NCAA Football 98. And while the difference in competition, I think, was a little bit more narrow in terms of the two games, I think that GameBreaker 98 had the edge. And then in 1999, we had yet another big change, and that is the game we're going to open here. This is NCAA GameBreaker 99, which was released in 1998. Here's the back of the case here, and you can see the polygon-based models, and it does talk about the fact that it comes from the makers of NFL Game Day. Sony was not shy about reminding people that they were the ones that had success with NFL Game Day and could hold their own against the EA Sports juggernaut. And what's probably most impressive about this game, at least to me, is that it marked the debut of Keith Jackson on commentary. And Keith Jackson, if you watched college football in the 80s and the 90s, he was synonymous with college football. He had certain mannerisms in a certain way that he delivered his commentary that were infectious. He was very energetic, and he was a lot of fun to listen to in the booth when there were big college football matchups on ABC Sports. So having him tied to this game and creating commentary, delivering commentary lines was a big deal. And that is just one of the elements or features listed here in the back of the case. So we have TV-style presentation with Keith Jackson. The voice of college football, Keith Jackson delivers the play-by-play in amazing detail. A TV-style camera puts you in the heart of every play. Revolutionary zoom-in, cutaways, and stadium fly-ins capture the intensity and spirit of college football like never before. Presentation was a big deal in this game, and it showed, at least in my opinion. State-of-the-art graphics with huge 3D players hitting the field in groundbreaking fashion. Motion capture athletes include former college students Ryan Leaf, oh boy, that didn't age well, Mike Allstott, Hardy Nickerson, and Jason Sehorn. See receivers turn their heads to receive a pass, ball carriers juke and drag tacklers into the end zone, defensive linemen execute swim moves, and much more. Experience all 112 stadiums like the Big House in Michigan and the Red Sea in Nebraska with animating backgrounds and historical landmarks. Again, presentation was key in this particular game, and in my opinion, it showed. Award-winning gameplay. Build your own dynasty with a revolutionary blue-chip recruiting mode. So now we're getting deeper into college football in terms of recruiting, and it's not just a season anymore. It's now about dynasty. It's more depth. So it's keeping college football fans interested in going through season after season, trying to build up their programs. Design your favorite play with the original play editor. Create your own schedule. Lead or underthrow receivers with total control passing, which was also an NFL Game Day thing. And feel every tackle with the DualShock controller. The DualShock controller was fairly new at this time, so feeling vibration from the controller was a fairly new thing. Unrivaled artificial intelligence translates into the most demanding computer opponent ever. I am not the best when it comes to playing football games, and I'll admit that Game Day's AI gave me a lot more trouble than Madden's ever did. Whether that's a plus or a minus is pretty much up to you. Unprecedented NCAA realism, all 112 Division 1A teams and 50 teams of the past. So that's 162 teams total. 98-99 playbooks with every authentic formation, more than 2,200 plays designed by college coaches and standouts. Again, Ryan Leaf is mentioned here. Playing 18 authentic bowl games, challenge for the Heisman Trophy, and qualify for the top 25 and All-American teams. Follow full team player and league leader stat tracking. This game for 1998 really had it all, and while EA Sports was trying to get on the map, NCAA GameBreaker 99 was far and ahead of NCAA Football 99, which was just starting to get into polygon graphics and still didn't have the commentary that this game had. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to open this up. This is, by the way, a 989 sports game. So now we're talking about moving away from Sony Computer Entertainment and Sony spawning its own 989 subsidiary for sports games, which unfortunately developed kind of a sour reputation over the years, but I think that that's rather unfounded. I think that the 989 brand did respectably well, although I don't think it did consistently well across all sports. So now we have to try and get this open, which is where I always struggle, because this you can't really use scissors for per se. So we're going to try and get this open so that we don't have to do another take, because this is like the 10th that I've had to do. There we go. So when we open this up and we take the seal off, maybe, there we go. We take the seal off. And we do have the ID sticker up there, NCAA GameBreaker 99. We're going to take the seal off now. We're going to take a look at the disc on the inside and take a look at the manual. I think the manual is pretty bare bones, but we'll look to be sure. So when we open up the case, okay, yep. We do have the NCAA GameBreaker 99 disc. We have an 989 Sports little fold out here, and we have an ad for NHL Faceoff 99 as well. We'll take a look really quickly before we look at the game at the 989 catalog, and we do see MLB 99, NFL Extreme, which is terrible, NFL Game Day 99, NHL Faceoff 99, NCAA Final Four 99, which again is unfortunately not very good, and Shootout 99 as well. And when we take a look on the inside, it just gives us a basic rundown of each game. It's a nice little fold-out. I do like these. I think it's a fun way to kind of look or encapsulate each game. MLB 99, I think, was impressive that year. NFL Game Day 99, I think that was the last time that the game really competed favorably against Madden before Madden and Game Day kind of started to get on the same page. NCAA Final Four 99, I think, was an interesting idea, but really didn't follow through all that well in terms of concept. Shootout 99, pretty much the same. The NBA Shootout series has never been my favorite, really. I've always preferred live to NBA Shootout, and it's just because of the presentation and because of the speed of gameplay. And NHL Faceoff 99, I think after coming out of the gates with NHL Faceoff, I think that series struggled a little bit in its conversion to 3D, whereas I think EA nailed it right after NHL 97. Starting with NHL 98, they really were clicking, and they never let off the gas, and I don't think that 989 had a chance to really catch up. So let's take a look at the instruction manual here really quickly. And it is fairly thick. It's 28 pages in length, and it is in black and white, and there aren't a lot of pictures here. There's a message here from 989 Studios saying, you know us, you know our games, and now you know our names. So apparently the 99 sports year 1998 is when 989 was formed. It's a wholly owned division of Sony Computer Entertainment America and has produced numerous action-adventure video game franchise hits, including Twisted Metal, Jet Moto, Cool Borders 2, 2 Extreme, and Rallycross. 989 Studios sports brand, 989 Sports, has also produced some of the best sports games on the PlayStation, including Game Day, MLB. Okay, yeah, we're there. All right, so that's not really all that impressive. When we take a look at the modes here, it's pretty deep. We have scrimmage, which is basically like a practice. We also have Fantasy League, so playing fantasy with college players. That's ahead of its time. College football tournament, which is nice. Weekly season, including a season menu. Bowl season. And blue chip recruiting. Build your program into an instant powerhouse by recruiting the nation's top blue chip incoming freshmen and junior college transfers. Play through the season and try to get your blue chips elected to the all-freshman team. So this really isn't so much a dynasty mode as it is kind of like a recruiting. It's kind of like a lead-in to what dynasty mode might be. So that's pretty interesting as well. Customize your playbook and more. Again, I think that GameBreaker 99 versus NCAA Football 99 that year, GameBreaker was still ahead in many categories. I think that EA Sports was catching up. But just like with Madden, I think that 2000 was the year where we started to see the playing field level off a little bit. Even with the inclusion of Keith Jackson and with no real commentary for the NCAA football games, I think that EA Sports was making strides to really narrow that gap and eventually overtake the NCAA GameBreaker series. And that leads us to the PlayStation 2. During the PlayStation 2 era, much like with the PlayStation era, EA was not ready with its football game just yet. It had Madden ready, and we're going to go over Madden 2001 in a future episode. But we did have NCAA GameBreaker 2001 for the PlayStation 2 that year. As a matter of fact, I believe it was released in November. This is a brand new copy, and you can also see the ID sticker up at the top there. Here is the back of the case, and again, I apologize for the glare. It looks a little rough, if we're being honest. I think the biggest difference here is that the frame rate was a bit better. I have not played GameBreaker 2001 yet, so this is me kind of going in blind here. And I'll take a look at some of the features on the back of the case, and there's a nice laundry list of features here as well. Of course, they're small, so I'm going to try and read them. The only college football game available for the PlayStation 2 computer entertainment system. So again, 989/Sony is trying to go back to the well and do with GameBreaker for the PS2 what they did with GameBreaker for the original PlayStation. That was to beat EA to the punch, and that was a big deal, or at least so they thought. New Millennium Stadium and player models. Every player is detailed to perfection. Well, I don't know about that. 300-pound linemen are monsters, and outside linebackers are tenaciously fast and chiseled to perfection. Neck and elbow pads, gloves, mouthpieces, and black paint under the eyes truly illustrate the attention to detail. Player models, of course, polygons are going to look smoother on a PlayStation 2. It's not going to look quite as jagged, and the game does look better than it ever did on the PlayStation, if we're being completely fair. But whether it stands up to future games against EA, that's really a tough call. Made by the pros, played by the pros. Game consultation from Heisman Trophy winner Ron Dane and University of Washington head coach Rick Neuheisel. So those are some pretty big names, at least back in the year 2000. Comprehensive collegiate-style football, 115 Division 1A teams and stadiums, more than 20 bowl games, the Heisman Trophy, exclusive college formations, including the wing T and option attack, all conference awards, and blue-chip recruiting returns. Keith Jackson also returns in commentary, calling all of the bone-crushing hits, razor-sharp passes, and game-breaking plays. And it's also compatible with NFL Game Day 2001 on the PlayStation 2. So you can download your NCAA GameBreaker Seniors into Game Day 2001. And that is a pretty cool feature, at least if you ask me. Again, looking at the screenshots, it is really tough to say whether they look better in terms of still images. And if you're thinking about what the NCAA football series would look like on the PS2, I do think that that would eventually look better, whereas 989 struggled in the transition to the emotion engine here. But I think for 2001, the game pretty much held its own. So let's go ahead and open it up, and we'll take a look at the instruction manual on the inside as well as the disc on the inside. And then hopefully in the next few days, I'm going to be able to play this guy and maybe talk on Twitter about my experience with it. So let's turn this around so you can see. And let's just rip that right open. Maybe. There we go. And we'll turn that over. Looks like this is going to be another long episode. All right, and let's take the ID label off the top here, and then we're going to take a look at the disc on the inside. So what was going on at this time in GameBreaker versus NCAA football history was, while this was first out of the gate, it wasn't well received by critics, and that was a kind of a big deal. Now, granted, too, that the PlayStation 2, when it was coming out of the gate, was also limited in terms of supply. A lot of people had to wait until well after launch in order to get their PS2s because there just weren't enough of them available. The PS2 launching out of the gate also had DVD movie capability, which made it very intriguing for people looking for a video game system, both new and old. So I think that that was a pretty big deal at the time. And again, we'll talk more about the launch of the PlayStation 2 a bit later this year when we celebrate its 20-year anniversary. When we open up the case here, okay, I'm going to show you everything. So when we open up the case, we do have the NCAA GameBreaker 2001 disc. It is a blue-backed CD-ROM. So if you have a PS2 that doesn't read the blue discs very well, this might not be the game for you. We also have a PlayStation Underground fold-out, which we'll get to, and a fairly large instruction manual as well. With the college game, I do expect the manuals to be a little bit larger than the pro game. When we take a look at the PlayStation Underground postcard, it does not look any different than we've seen in the past. Free PlayStation 2 stuff. You just have to fill this out, but you did have to put a stamp on it. Cheapies. So taking a look at this, there's some interesting things on here. Again, considering this is for the PS2, how many PlayStation 2 games do you own? They don't give enough room here. It's like a 3-digit total for me. In the next 6 months, approximately how many PS2 games will you purchase? What types of PS2 games do you plan to purchase? How many hours do you play on your PS2 per week? How many DVD movies do you plan to purchase in the next 6 months? Again, DVD movie playback was a big deal with the PS2. And what type of internet connection do you have? Narrowband, broadband, or none? Broadband being ISDN, cable, DSL, and T1 to T3 lines. Boy, if you could afford a T1 to T3 at your house back in 2000, you were set. Now let's take a look at the manual. And again, the manual is fairly thick. It is not small. And we take a look at the back of the manual. We do have another listing of 989 sports game for the PS2, NFL Game Day 2001. Again, we will get to that one a little bit later this year. NCAA Final Four 2001, Shootout 2001, and Face Off 2001 as well. The manual is surprisingly and welcomingly in color, and I love that. It has that white, black, and red trim, which I like a lot. There aren't a lot of screenshots here, though. It's just a lot of words, which I guess you would pretty much expect, talking about total control passing and some of the basic play controls. And there's not a lot different here. Scrimmage is here, just like in previous installments of the game. Let's see here. Advanced options. Bowl season is here, so it's a complete college football season. Statistics, rankings, tournament seasons. So you're playing in a postseason tournament series. And again, this is before playoff tournaments were a thing in college football. Back then, it was just whoever was number one, and that was it. The fantasy game is back, which I think is pretty neat. There's also a college career here where you can act as a college head football coach. From among the NCAA's Division 1A teams, you'll be able to select any available job from a number of smaller schools and help build their college football programs. So that's an interesting way to look at blue chip recruiting, which also returns recruiting top incoming freshmen and JUCO transfers as well. So that's got some depth to it. And yeah, I think that the game is pretty deep, just like its original PlayStation counterpart. And there was NCAA GameBreaker 2001 for the PlayStation as well. But by this time, because the game was not very well received, and with NCAA Football 2002 really making a pretty big splash the following year, GameBreaker was on its way down. NCAA Football from EA Sports had narrowed the gap, just like Madden had narrowed the gap, and 989 Sports was really struggling to maintain any kind of competition. And it wasn't long before 989 Sports was kind of falling off the map, with really only one sport left to its credit, being baseball. And that would be a pretty big deal, of course, because its MLB series would lead to MLB The Show, which remains active to this very day on the PlayStation 4. So that's a look at the GameBreaker series from its pretty lofty beginnings, where it bolted out of the gate and sold very well, competed against EA's NCAA football series favorably for 2 or 3 years before the gap would narrow, and eventually the paths would diverge, where NCAA football would be on the upwards path. NCAA GameBreaker would unfortunately be on the downward path. NCAA GameBreaker 2004 would be the last GameBreaker game released by 989 Sports for the PlayStation 2, and the series went out pretty much with a whimper that year, because NCAA Football 2004, which, oh, by the way, we will get to in a couple of weeks, was an excellent college football game. As always, I thank you very much for checking out this episode of Unsealed. Until the next time, my friends, please take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll do it again soon.